Good morning. This is David Bennett, and this is Bitcoin And, a podcast where I try to find the edge effect between the worlds of Bitcoin, gaming, permaculture, podcasting, and education to gain a better understanding of all. Edge effect is a concept from ecology describing a greater diversity of life where the edges of two systems overlap. While species from either system can be found at the edge, it is important to note there are species in the overlap that exist in neither system, and that is what I seek to uncover. So join me in discovering the variety of things being created as Bitcoin rubs up against other systems.
It is 8:57 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. It's the 24th day of September, 2024. In fact, we got two 24s. Got to be some kind of numerology going on there, right? Am I right? This is episode 960 of Bitcoin and China. China did something. They always do something. Germany's doing something because, Germany is just going to German, right? And we got some Telegram news, Durov, all of that. But, woke up this morning to consumer index or consumer consumption and consumer confidence numbers, and they were, basically not good. And we're going to talk about that when we get to the market section or a little bit after the market section, because that leads into a couple of other things that's going on. But the theme of the day is wealth. I've titled this episode, "What is Wealth?" Now, clearly, I'm not going to do the entire episode, but the first half, before we do the weather report and get into the market numbers and doing all that, is I want to have a discussion about what is wealth. And honestly, this started this morning when I woke up. Because let me tell you about what happened when I woke up this morning. I woke up, and then my wife was, taking my arm and putting it around her. And then, cuddling up. And it was in that moment that I understood something very critical. That was real wealth. That was being rich. That's what wealth is. And there's other forms of wealth, right? But what I'm trying to impart here before we start out on this journey today is that I believe that wealth for the great guts and feathers of the citizenries of all the governments around the world as of today is not what they think wealth is. It is their perception of what they've been told wealth is. And when we get to the Durov story, you're going to understand how it is not wealth at all. It's a weapon. The perception of wealth that we've been given by governments. We might as well have been given a gun and told that pointing it at our own head is in our best interests. But we've got to wait for the government to tell us when to pull the trigger, and that also is in our best interest. If you don't understand what the hell that I'm talking about, you will. But first, we do really need to talk about China. Okay, the wealth thing, this is a theme of the day. Okay, so I want you to keep what is wealth in mind. What is wealth to you? What does wealth mean to your neighbor? What does wealth mean to your most trusted and loved family member? Keep all of that in mind throughout the entirety of today's episode. Let's start with China. China's central bank has unveiled the most aggressive stimulus package since the pandemic. Ryan Wu and Lingping Gao is writing this for Reuters, of all things. I don't normally use Reuters, but today we're going to use Reuters because China's central bank on Tuesday unveiled its largest stimulus package since the pandemic to pull the economy out of its deflationary funk and back towards the government's growth target. But analysts warned more fiscal help was vital to hit these goals. The broader than expected package, offering more funding and interest rate cuts, marks the latest attempt by Chinese policymakers to restore confidence in the world's second largest economy after a slew of disappointing data raised concerns of a prolonged structural slowdown, but analysts questioned how productive the People's Bank of China's liquidity injections would be given extremely weak credit demand from businesses and consumers. That means nobody's getting loans. And noted the absence of any policies aimed at supporting real economic activity. Keep in mind the question, what is wealth? And you might as well extend that to, what is real economic activity anyway? Is it a perception that we've been fed? Or is this real? Quote, "This is the most significant PBOC stimulus package since the early days of the pandemic," said capital economist or economics analyst Julian Evans Pritchard. Quote, "But on its own, it may not be enough," he added, saying that more fiscal stimulus may be needed to return growth to a trajectory towards this year's official target of roughly 5%. Chinese stocks and bonds rallied, and Asian stocks hit 2.5-year highs as Governor Pan Gongshang announced plans to lower borrowing costs. Read that as, we want you to take loans and inject more funds into the economy. Read that as, we want you to take more loans, because that's how money is injected into the economy. As well as to ease households' mortgage repayment burdens. The yuan currency jumped to a 16-month high against the dollar. And Pan told a news conference that the central bank will, in the near future, cut the amount of cash that banks must hold as reserves. You mean to read that one again? I mean, honestly, we're only 3 or 4 paragraphs into this thing, and already that the central bank is going to, in the near future, cut the reserve requirements for their banks by 50 basis points, in fact, freeing up about 1 trillion yuan, or about $142 billion for new lending. To inject that cash. Got to get that cash in there. You got to have a reason for people to take loans, because that's the major mechanism that cash is created in not just the United States, but everywhere, depending on the market liquidity situation later on this year. The RRR, or the reserve requirement ratio, may be further lowered by another 25 to 50 basis points, Pan said in a rare forward-looking remark. The PBOC will also cut the 7-day reverse repo rate, its new benchmark, by 0.2 percentage points to 1.5%, as well as cutting other interest rates. The People's Bank of China said that it will cut the 7-day repo rate by 0.2 percentage points, while the interest rates on medium-term lending facility will drop by about 30 basis points, and loan prime rates by 20 to 25 basis points. Quote, "The move probably comes a bit too late, but, it's better late than never," said Gary NG is his last name, senior economist at Natixis. Quote, "China needs a lower rate environment to boost confidence." Where does that sound familiar from? Pan did not specify when the moves will take effect. But the property market, let's get into the property market in China. The property market support package included a 50 BPS reduction on average interest rates for existing mortgages and a cut in the minimum down payment requirements to 15% on all types of homes, among other measures. What does that tell you? It tells you that the real estate market in China not doing well. And it's not like we don't know this. This is not a secret. We've known for at least 2 years that the real estate market in China is a dog with fleas. Empty buildings that their whole towns being dynamited after they were built 10 years ago because nobody's getting into the apartments that were built. It's a horrible situation for China, by the way. I mean, it's clearly not good for the rest of the world either, but directly affecting the Chinese people, this shit is not good. To the point that now they're going to cut the minimum down payment requirement. Wow. That's just signaling that shit's bad. China's property market has been in a severe downturn since peaking in 2021. A string of developers have defaulted, leaving behind large inventories of unwanted apartments and a troubling list of uncompleted projects. Beijing has removed many home purchase restrictions and sharply lowered mortgage rates and down payment requirements in response, but has so far failed to revive demand or arrest slumping home prices, which fell at the sharpest pace in more than 9 years in August. The property crisis has weighed heavily upon the economy and crippled consumer confidence, given that 70% of household savings are parked where? Real estate. Even the Chinese are making this mistake. Analysts remain unconvinced that the latest measures will have a significant impact. Quote, households who are uncertain over their income prospects in a weak job market may not be willing to take on higher leverage, Gavikal Dragonomics analyst said in a note on the latest measures. The PBOC also introduced 2 new tools to boost the capital market. First, a swap program sized at an initial 500 billion won allows funds, insurers, and brokers easier access to funding in order to buy stocks. That's right, equities, like buying Texaco stock, right? Stocks. And the second provides up to 300 billion won in cheap PBOC loans to commercial banks to help them fund other entities' share purchases and buybacks. I'm going to come back to that if I can get my brain cells to rub together and spark a fire. I'm going to come back to that. But ending this, there's no bazooka. The August economic data broadly missed expectations, adding urgency for policymakers to roll out more support. On the fiscal side, local governments have been quickening bond issuance to help build or fund infrastructure projects, but analysts say that more is needed. Quote, an aggressive fiscal policy is required to inject genuine economic demand. Aggressive fiscal policy is required to inject genuine economic demand. What word in that sentence does not belong? The word that I'm thinking of is genuine. There's no way you can have genuine in this sentence when your fiscal policy, it has to be aggressive. It's required to be aggressive to inject economic demand. Yes, I can see that, but genuine? Fuck no. It's fake. It's fake economic demand. It's the same bullshit we've been dealing with for decades and decades and decades. Anyway, investment banks, including Goldman Sachs, Nomura, UBS, and the Bank of America have recently cut their 2024 growth forecasts. China's latest measures comes after the Federal Reserve in the U.S. last week delivered a hefty rate cut, allowing the PBOC to ease their monetary conditions without putting too much pressure on the yuan. Quote, there is still room for further easing in the months ahead, said Lin Song, chief economist for Greater China at ING. If we see large fiscal policy pushes as well, momentum could recover heading into the fourth quarter. Oh, yay. Let's go back to this. That's the end of the article. Let's go back to this paragraph. This is being swept under the rug by Reuters. The PBOC has introduced 2 new tools. New tools. These are brand new. These were not in existence prior to what the PBOC has just done. And they're tools to boost the capital markets. The first is a program, 150 billion won, that allows funds and insurers and brokers access to funding in order to buy stocks. They're going to just print money to buy stocks. They have to prop up their stock market. But as if that wasn't enough, and it's not, a second new tool provides another 300 billion won in loans, just general fucking loans to commercial banks. Remember, the first group was brokers, insurers, and funds. But now they're saying, to hell with it. Let's give 300 billion bucks to commercial banks to help them fund other entities. share purchases and buybacks. So they're going to loan money through the commercial banks. The PBOC is basically loaning commercial banks money so that they in turn can loan that money to Chinese companies so that they can buy back their stock. This is 800 billion won specifically designed to prop up the Chinese stock market. What could possibly go wrong? What could possibly go wrong? I don't know. But I'm hoping that you remembered to think of the sentence, what is wealth? It sure as shit isn't this issue where an aggressive fiscal policy is required to inject genuine economic demand. There's nothing genuine about it. There can't be. By definition, genuine economic demand is me needing to go buy a chicken because I'm going to have chicken dinner with my family because we're hungry and we would like to eat dinner. That's genuine economic demand. Building 10 million apartment complexes in China is not genuine economic demand. That was just a false front. They needed somebody to buy the cement. They needed somebody to pay the laborers. They didn't have any intention whatsoever of really needing those apartments to be rented. It was a short-term fix for China's economic downturn. And there was never a downturn that anybody in the world could actually see because the numbers all looked good. Why? Shit tons of cement, reinforcement rod, steel, glass were being bought, and a whole bunch of wood was being bought. A whole bunch of raw materials were being purchased month over month, year over year. And the labor market was booming because there was they needed people to actually build these things. But there was never a time when anybody building these things actually thought that anybody was going to buy the apartment, or if they did, actually inhabit that apartment, because it wasn't about building apartments. It was just about building for building's sake. That is not genuine economic activity. That's not genuine economic demand. What China's doing is fake. The Federal Reserve, what they're doing is fake. We've got numbers. The consumer confidence index is not good as of this morning. And we can see it because a whole bunch of red dildos showed up in Bitcoin and equity markets and oil markets. I mean, you name it. And it was immediately after the release of those numbers, red dildos. Everybody flying to cash. Everybody's flying to cash. And what are the people in Germany doing? Well, the people in Germany should be looking back behind them because the German government is planning an expansion of surveillance. Surveillance of what, you ask? Bank account surveillance. This is Lola Leitz. She writes this rag called The Rage. And I don't mean rag in a bad way. I like Lola Leitz. She's very good. So when I mean rag, I mean that in, let's say, something that's not mainstream media, which basically means that I trust it almost immediately a lot more than I trust CNN. She writes that the proposed security package discussed on Monday includes a draft law to improve counterterrorism, which outlines a provision to alleviate banks of the requirement to cancel the accounts of customers under suspicion of terrorist financing to enhance the German Federal Police's capabilities of surveilling transactions and accounts. They made a trade. The German banks are going, we don't want to do this. And the police said, sure, that's fine. You don't have to close them, but we want the surveillance. We want to know what's coming into those accounts. We want to know every transaction going out, everything coming in. We want to know who holds it, where they live, what their any personal identification numbers that has been given by the German government. We want those too. They want everything. And as of now, banks often choose to suspend the accounts of individuals subject to suspicious transactions and activity reports to subvert possible legal risk. Under the proposed security package, though, the BKA, the police, would gain the capability of increased surveillance by enabling the police to operate undetected. Undetected. You will never know that your bank account in Germany is being surveilled. That's what that means. The provision intends to subvert the premature notification of suspects and thus possibly interfere with police work. They don't want them closing the accounts so that the people get wind that like if they're doing anything wrong at all, right? Or anything that even might remotely be considered wrong. They don't want anybody understanding that that the jig is up. Right. But this is really about normal people. It's not about the terrorism. That's all bullshit and you know it. But if I get my bank closed down, then I might be going, uh-oh, what did I do? Maybe I might be, I don't know, involved in a little bit of skullduggery or something like that and clean up my act almost immediately. But the police don't want that. The police want to arrest them. In 2023, the German Financial Intelligence Unit received 337,000 reports on suspicion of AML-CTF violations, of which roughly 63,000 had little or nothing to do with money laundering or terrorist financing, according to a proposal to modernize the FIU. That's the Financial Intelligence Unit. Under the proposed law, close to 20% of the individuals under investigations for anti-money laundering and know your customer or CTF stuff violations would thereby unjustly fall victim to prolonged surveillance of their financial activities via the German federal police. In the Monday hearing, the proposed security package was met with skepticism, speaking to possible infringements on fundamental rights. The law is proposed on the basis of The law is proposed on the basis of increased risks of terrorist activity in Germany following October 7th. It seeks to expand police access to relevant data in counterterrorism activities and includes the use of biometric surveillance software and search and seizures without suspicion in public spaces. That means they can just grab you off the fucking street. That's the end of the article. I don't know what to tell you. What has happened to Germany? What has happened to Germany? And guess what? The majority of the influx of the immigrants into Germany right now, which the German people have a lot of problems with, what they don't have? They don't have German bank accounts. They're not going to be under any kind of surveillance whatsoever. But the German people themselves, the people that were born there and live there, yeah, they are. What if people had enough? You know what we should do? We should stage a protest because, that always works. Yeah, right. Well, let's move over to Durov and Telegram. And remember, what is wealth? And this story in particular, you really need to keep asking yourself that question. What have you been taught wealth is? Is it a fuck ton of money? Is it 12 Learjets? Is it 50 houses in the south of France? Is it Lambos and Porsches and Ferraris? Is it like big tittied bitches on either side of your arm everywhere you go when you're eating like $1,000 plate meals and buying $1,500 bottles of champagne? Is that wealth? I wonder what the CEO of Telegram, Durov, says about wealth now. Because he is basically telling us that he's going to provide even more data to governments. Remember when I first started telling you about Telegram and that Telegram was already gone and you just don't know it yet? I was right. By the way, this is out of Bloomberg, Jeff Stone writing, messaging app Telegram will provide users' IP addresses and phone numbers to the relevant authorities in response to, quote, valid legal requests, according to Chief Executive Officer Pavel Durov. The platform changed its terms and service to deter criminals from abusing it, which is bullshit and we all know it. But Durov said in a post on Telegram on Monday that was in fact the fucking case. The move comes less than a month after his arrest in France, where he faces charges of alleged complicity in the spread of child sexual abuse material, or CSAM. The move represents a marked difference from Telegram's approach to government requests for data and its reputation for lax moderation. The United Arab Emirates-based platform has been notoriously non-responsive to takedown requests from governments around the world and often ignored requests for information about suspected criminals. The app, using artificial intelligence and a team of moderators, has now begun — this isn't going to start, it already has now begun to conceal problematic content from its search results as part of its effort to prevent misuse, Durov said. French prosecutors in August charged the Russian-born Durov in connection with alleged crimes committed on the app. The case portrays the billionaire — what is wealth? What is wealth? What is wealth? — portrays the billionaire CEO as the head of a company that refused to provide law enforcement with data to assist legal wiretaps on suspected criminals. Well, Durov, who's been ordered to remain in France during the investigation, denies the charges. And under Durov, Telegram has drawn the ire of governments ranging from European Union to authoritarian regimes in Russia and Iran. It's been used by protesters seeking to organize against the authority, while also becoming a hub for conspiracy theorists and extremists. I'll bet they're all right-wing, right? While white supremacists in the United States for years have used Telegram to coordinate their attacks on power infrastructure. Wait, what? What? I see no string of power infrastructure problems. There was a couple of reports where some big badass transformers got hit by a high-powered 308 at distance and kind of basically screwed it up. But I see no widespread white supremacist attacks on power infrastructure in the United States. That is a lie. But the Kremlin in 2018 attempted to block Telegram, only to reverse course 2 years later after failing to shut down the service. And when the ban was dropped, the Russian regulator said that Durov had signaled that he would help counter extremism and terrorism. Durov's arrest has led to a number of policy changes at Telegram, and earlier this month, Telegram disabled new media uploads, which Durov said was aimed at stopping bots and scammers. What is wealth? This is the gun to the head. This is exactly the gun to the head that I was talking about when we first started talking about all of this stuff. Durov is a billionaire. And he was a billionaire before he started Telegram. He's a man that is used to the finer things in life, ladies and gentlemen. He's used to being a billionaire. He's used to flying to France to go party down in Paris or whatever on his private jet. Because, that's perceived wealth. Except what he didn't count on is getting his ass taken into custody the minute that he hit the tarmac with his Italian shoes. That's a signal of wealth too, is it not? Maybe the Rolex. Maybe he was about to get into a Bentley or a Rolls Royce before he was absconded away with, at the Paris airport or wherever the hell this was. Right? And now, all of a sudden, Durov, over the last 2 times that I've presented what he's been saying about Telegram and what they're going to do on this show, is basically being exactly the opposite of what Durov has always been. And the question becomes, why? Well, I don't know Durov professionally. I don't know him personally. I've never spoken to him. Understand that. I'm being completely transparent. So all I have is straight up conjecture. But the enormity of his wealth was, how to say this? Everything Durov has as a billionaire is structured around fiat money, which means that fiat money carries with it the ire, the toxicity, the malfeasance, the misfeasance, and the fucking malice of the governments of the world who created that currency. And therefore, everywhere that currency goes to infects the recipient and basically makes them a slave of the state. That's what I'm saying. And I'm no different. Do I have a bank account in the United States? Yes, I do. Does it have United States fiat currency in it? Yes, it does. Do I also have Bitcoin? I've got a little bit. Yes, I do. His wealth is being used. It's being held hostage. And Durov knows it. He knows it. His extreme wealth is now the gun that he is holding against his own head. And unless he does exactly what the authorities in France wants, and do you think that it's just the French authorities that want this? No, no, no. They themselves are being held hostage by higher powers. And they are being told to tell Durov exactly what he needs to be told. And that is that Telegram is no longer ever going to be a safe space for any private discussions amongst any individuals at all, forever and yon. And his own wealth is being used to ensure that. His own wealth is the insurance policy. Does that mean I'm asking everybody to be poor? No, of course not. But unless we really look at what fiat currency really is, what it was always meant to do, then we're not going to figure out a way to have a different kind of wealth. What is wealth to you? What does capital actually mean to you? I mean, I have $100. I have $100 worth of fiat money. Well, I also have $100 worth of capital that I could possibly go, I don't know, start a lemonade stand for my daughter. It's not going to do much. We all know what lemonade stands do. It's a waste of money, but it's good. They're good training grounds for children. I'm just saying that I have the ability, if I have $100 in fiat cuck bucks, I have $100 in deployable capital, and I can become a capitalist. And maybe you never know. Maybe my daughter does something like spectacular with the lemonade stand and kicks complete ass and makes that $100 back plus another $100. That's what capital's supposed to do. But when everybody was taken off of every physical commodity backing asset that there was for fiat currency, like gold, silver, anything. If it was like generally speaking, gold is a commodity. All right, it's classified as a commodity, at least by the CFTC and the SEC in the United States. But gold is an asset that is generally speaking a commodity. It's rare. It's hard to get. It does cool stuff. It doesn't oxidize, so it's really good in jewelry and damn fine performance in electronics, right? That's why, because it doesn't oxidize. That's the thing. That's why. And the fact that it's malleable and you can form it into it. You can work with it. It's really a great material. Gold is a fantastic material. Does all kinds of magic shit. It's like a magic rock, right? So some people will say, well, they took us off the gold standard. In 1971, Nixon took us off the gold standard. And many people say always the same thing, and I've been guilty of this as well, that they did it to fund the war because they just couldn't print money for the Vietnam War because it was backed by gold. So the only way to really get around that shit was to take us off the gold standard and put us on a fully fiat standard, and then we could fund the Vietnam War. No, I call bullshit. It was to do what's being done to Durov. His wealth is polluted. His wealth is toxic. His wealth is under the full control of everybody other than Durov. Okay, well, not his neighbor. His neighbor doesn't have any control over his wealth. But the people that actually can make other people's lives miserable forever and ever and ever, they're the ones that have control. It's like having remote access. That's what fiat creation was all about. It wasn't as much about being able to fund wars. That was a side bonus. The ability was for governments to control the individuals that became wealthy. Now I want you to think of Elon Musk and Bill Gates, along with Pavel Durov. Now, I don't want Pavel. It's not that I hate Durov. That's not what I'm getting at. He's a sucker. And you'll go, well, he's eating duck l'orange. Yeah, by permission. All of his money is permissioned money. All of his capital is permissioned capital. It's all remote control. Now, what's not remote control? When my wife spun over, grabbed my arm, and threw it over her and started cuddling, that was wealth. And yes, you'll say, well, they can take her away, but they can't take her love for me away. And while it would be horrible to have my wife taken away from me, or it'd be horrible for my wife and kids to have me taken away from them, and yes, that physically can't happen, my love for my kids cannot be subjugated. It is non-remote controllable. It is everything that is not fucking fiat. That's wealth. But it won't feed you, David. Other kind of capital that also has the ability to be kind of non-confiscatable, and I'm not just talking about Bitcoin here, they exist. And in fact, there's 8 forms of capital as defined by Bill Mollison's permaculture. Now, I'm going to read you this from thinglishlifestyle.com. Thinglish, like think English, but, things, like, having this thing and that thing. Thinglishlifestyle.com. And it gives a definition of permaculture, and it goes through a couple of other things, but I really just want to center in and read these small captions about what the 8 forms of capital is. And we're going to begin with human capital. No, I'm sorry. Let's begin with financial capital. I'm sorry. I misread that. The first form of capital in Bill Mollison's permaculture is financial capital, which is the money we have available to invest in our permaculture systems and projects. Financial capital allows us to purchase land, tools, materials, and other resources that we need to establish and maintain our permaculture systems. It also allows us to pay for professional services and support such as consulting, design, and education. Financial capital has been wrecked. I'm not just like going to say all the stuff that I said and then read this definition of financial capital and then say, well, this time it's different. No, financial capital has been thoroughly wrecked by the powers that be across the world in all nations in the land. Right? Financial capital is toxic, at least the way it's structured right now. Bitcoin is the only thing that I can see that is not toxified by governments of the world. However, that doesn't make it completely safe. I mean, if all 175 nations in the world decided that Bitcoin was going to be illegal all at once, we've probably got some problems. But those problems would be a lot bigger, and would need immediate solutions by the populace of the world, not just the United States. And it would be an immediate reaction. That's why it's never been done. And that's why that's never going to be done. So Bitcoin is still a way out. But human capital is the second form of capital, and it's knowledge. Can't be taken away from you. Skills, they cannot be taken away from you. Experience that people bring to their projects and communities cannot be taken away from the person. Human capital is what allows us to design, implement, and manage systems, and is what makes us valuable to other practitioners in things like permaculture. Investing in our own human capital through education, training, and hands-on experience can help us become more effective and successful, and cannot be taken away from you. Social capital is the third form of capital, and it is the networks and the relationships that we have with other people who are interested, in this case, in permaculture, but interested in anything. People that are interested in Bitcoin, people that are interested in figuring out a way out of this mess. These are the social capital is your social graph, the people that you know. It can be informal, like connections we make with other permaculture practitioners. You got to understand this is a permaculture blog, so we're going to have to deal with the permaculture words here. But it can also be formal, like the relationships that we have with permaculture organizations and groups. Social capital is what allows us to access resources, information, and support that we might not otherwise have access to. And a very good portion of that cannot actually be taken away from us because it's more like the human capital. Then there's cultural capital, and that's the fourth form of capital in permaculture. These are the shared values, the beliefs, norms that shape our spaces and behaviors and guides our decisions in whatever context you choose. Cultural capital is what defines permaculture communities and gives us a sense of belonging and connection. It's also what allows us to understand and communicate with other permaculture practitioners, and it helps us navigate the complexities of sustainable design and implementation. And then there's natural capital, the fifth form of capital. It's the Earth's natural resources, the soil, the water, the air, the biodiversity that we all rely on to establish and maintain all of our systems, not just permaculture. It's what allows us to grow food and medicine and other useful plants and animals in our systems. And it's what provides us with a rich array of ecosystems and habitats to support our well-being. Investing in natural capital through conservation, restoration, and regenerative practices can help us create more sustainable and resilient permaculture systems. And then there's intellectual capital, and that's the sixth form of capital. It's the knowledge and information that we create and accumulate through our experiences and practices. Intellectual capital includes things like design plans, what kind of plants you might put into a permaculture system, whole animal lists and how they work together, soil testing, and other technical information that we use to manage our permaculture systems. It also includes the expertise and know-how that we develop through research and experimentation. Intellectual capital is what allows us to innovate and adapt to changing conditions. We need that right now more than ever. And it's what enables us to improve and optimize organic systems over time. Spiritual capital. Seventh form of capital. Values, beliefs, and principles that guide our actions and inform our decisions in the context of permaculture. It's what gives us a sense of purpose and meaning in our work. It's also what allows us to connect with the deeper significance and beauty of the natural world. And then we come to the eighth form of capital, physical capital. Buildings, structures, tools, and other tangible assets that we use to establish and maintain our systems. It's what allows us to turn our permaculture designs into reality. It's what enables us to create the material infrastructure that supports our permacultural practices. Investing in physical capital can help us grow and expand our ecological systems, and it can make our permaculture practices more efficient and effective. Okay, that's the 8 forms of capital. And two of them can be toxicified by governments. Which ones do you think those are? It's the financial capital, which is the first form, and the last one, the 8th form, the structural capital or the physical capital, buildings, land, these kinds of things. These can and will be taken away from us if we are on government radar and we end up being bad little boys and girls, right? So outside of those two, though, we've got 6 forms of capital that almost nobody can lay their hands on. And I'm not saying don't buy land. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying don't invest. I'm not saying don't use fiat currency if you can use it to do something that will not get you in Pavel Durov's position. The constant need to be rich as shit has just taken so many people to the point that all they've done to themselves is put themselves under the yoke of masters who understand true wealth are the things that you do not own. You control them, sure. And those people are fucking evil. So don't get me wrong. The people that are in control of Bill Gates, the people that are in control, these are the people that they are the people without names. Can I prove it? No. Am I going to try? No. This one, you take it with a grain of salt if you wish. You believe me if you wish. You tell everybody else that I'm a tinfoil hatter if you wish. Completely up to you. I feel in no way, shape, or form beholden to anybody to tell you what you can clearly see with your own eyes. Bill Gates is not the master of the universe. Elon Musk is not the master of the universe. We don't know who these people are. But I'll goddamn guarantee you this. Whatever wealth they hold, they don't actually hold it themselves. And I'm talking physical capital. I'm talking financial capital, millions of dollars, billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars in banks. Their names are not on it. They control it. And because they can do that, nobody can take it away from them because nobody knows where to go. Besides, they're the masters of the universe anyway. They're pretty much calling the shots from on high. But Pavel Durov, he's a pleb. You go, God, you're an idiot, Dave. He's got billions of dollars. Yeah, billions of dollars that are ammunition inside the gun, pointed at his own head as he's being told what to do. Because if he pulls that trigger, there's only two things that can happen if he pulls that trigger. He pulls that trigger and realizes that he's going to lose his wealth, but he's going to save his life and his soul. That's not the death of Pavel Durov. That's the death of the person that swore up and down that it would work if they put this gun in Pavel Durov's hands. Sadly, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's going to be the second case. If he pulls that trigger, he's going to blow his brains out. But either way, it's the capital, it's this financial toxicity that has been generated by the governments as a means of control and not the carrot at the end of the stick. This is not a carrot and stick situation. This is straight up toxic bullshit. They've turned the money into a drug and they've addicted everybody on the planet, even the people that don't have the money. They do have the desire for that money, and therefore they're just as addicted as Pavel Durov to his billions of dollars, which he technically, quote unquote, physically owns. It's all bullshit. What is wealth? Let's run the numbers. CNBC futures and commodities. They got oil, West Texas Intermediate up 1.5 points to 71.37. Brent North Sea up 1.5 to 74.98. Natural gas is down 1/4. Gasoline is up 2.15% to just over $2 a gallon. Gold doing well today, 0.81% to the upside, 26.74. I do believe that's an all-time high. Silver is up 4.25 points to $32, actually $32.50 almost. Platinum is up 2.5%. Copper is up 3. Palladium is up 1.5. Ag, who's the biggest winner today? It looks to me like it's going to be sugar. 2.33 to the upside. Biggest loser is wheat. 0.86 to the downside. Live cattle up 1/4. Lean hogs up 0.17, and feeder cattle up 0.16%. Now the equities. Nobody knows what the hell's going on, so that explains these numbers. The Dow in the red, but basically moving sideways, 0.01% to the downside. S&P is up 0.16%. NASDAQ is up just over 0.5%, but the S&P Mini is moving sideways, but in the red, 0.06 to the downside. Now, Bitcoin's no different. We had a little bit of a tumble this morning. $63,270. That's $1.25 trillion of market cap. 23.9 ounces of shiny metal rocks might be had with our one Bitcoin, of which there are 19,758,183.62 of, and average fees per block have risen, but only slightly, back up to the median 0.06 BTC on average on a per block basis. And how many blocks are there, you ask? Well, there's 92 of them, and they carry 165,480 unconfirmed transactions waiting to clear it. My God, the high priority rates are 3 Satoshis per VByte. Low priorities, 3 Satoshis per VByte. Hash rate, what's it doing? It's at 642.9 exahashes per second. So we've dropped almost a full 100 exahashes per second from the all-time high that we had a couple of days ago, which always makes me wonder, how the hell do you turn off 100 exahashes of mining per second? What? That's a lot. I mean, that's a whole lot. Okay, from Chocolate Payment Cookies, which was episode 959 of Bitcoin, and Aggie Chute with 5,000 says, we need to become the fungus. From how I understood Renee Aaron's explanation, the Nostr Wallet Connect enables exactly these kinds of recurring payments that you want for software use. I'm a big fan of Alby and the Nostr Wallet Connect because Nostr Wallet Connect came out of the folks that were building Alby. So please understand that. Everything the guys at Alby and the position they've taken on being able to build this Nostr Wallet Connect is everything that is right about the direction that the Lightning Network is going in the hands of a third party, somebody who's building on top of the Lightning Network protocol. I want to see more of it. I agree, Aggie Shoot. Okay, so the Bitcoin Potter with 5,000 says, keep the sats. Oh, thank you, brother. Let the people know that if anyone would like Bitcoin-themed pottery like mugs and bowls and plates, etc., find me on Nostr at Bitcoin Potter. That's Bitcoin Potter. Bitcoin Potter is all one word. Potter. What's up, Potter? Sorry, that's my terrible English accent for the Harry Potter series. Or on the Deadbird site at BTC Potter. BTC Potter over on Deadbird. All items are handmade to order. Website coming soon. Keep sending the signal. I will. Slow with 2100 says, a la carte cookie menu. Yum. God's Death with 537 says, thank you, sir. No, thank you. Pies to Pleb with 420 says, thank you, sir. No, thank you. Wartime with a couple of pizza and some beer emojis with 333 sats. I appreciate it, my brother. Nostr Gang 100 says, I'd go back to Windows 98 in a heartbeat. Yeah, I understand that. I want to say something about old operating systems. They're not as toxic as the new operating systems. And everybody who looks at me, like for instance, if I were to go and, I don't know, apply for a computer job, they'd say, well, how much do Windows 10 do you know? I'd be like, I don't know, I'm on Windows 7. There's no way I'm getting even break fix IT positions where, you know, somebody's mouse stops working and I got to go restart their driver or some shit like that. Won't even get that because I'm on an old operating system and they think I'm an idiot. And when they say that they would require me to have all this knowledge about Windows 10, I kind of don't want to be in the same room with people that are that fucking stupid. And I'm not saying that if you're running Windows 10 that you're stupid. I'm just saying that we need to start understanding that what's being done to our infrastructure as far as computers and servers and, you know, corporate-based software is the exact same thing that was done to the fiat currency. Since it's not backed by, you know, any morals and ethics, because clearly Bill Gates has none and his cadre over there at Microsoft probably have none either, then it's going to do the exact same thing. It's a method of control, not of productivity. Just like the turning of gold-backed currency into fully formed fiat currency was not to fund wars, although that's, again, side effect that I'm sure did them very, very well. But, in fact, well, what can I say? Method of control. The new operating systems that are being released by Apple, that are being released by Google, that are being released by Microsoft. They're methods of control now. They're just like fiat currency. Took them a while to figure out how to do it, how to make it toxic, how to inject it in your lives on an everyday basis so that we have no choice but to fucking use it. But as long as you're aware that that's what's occurring, you're in a much, much better position than somebody that just blindly trusts anything that Microsoft releases. Always question. I tell my kids this all the time. Always question authority. Somebody tells you something, ask, how do you know that? I expect the same kind of behavior. I say something, people go, how do you know that? And I'll be forced to say, well, I'm not exactly sure. That's why I say a lot of times on this show, it's a gut feeling. That's the weather report. Welcome to part 2 of the news that you can use. And in today's news, the September Consumer Confidence Report has fallen the most in 3 years. Wow, CNBC Jeff Cox is writing this one. We'll pick out the major points. Consumers' views on the economy tumbled in September. falling by the largest level in more than 3 years. Count them, not 1, not 2, but 3 full years as fears grow about jobs and business conditions, the conference board reported on Tuesday. The board's consumer confidence index slid to 98.7, and that means it's down from 105.6 back in August, the biggest one-month decline since August of 2021. The Dow Jones Consensus forecast was for a reading of 104. By contrast, the index had a reading of 132.6 in February 2020, a month before the COVID pandemic hit. Each of the 5 components the organization samples fared worse on the month, with the biggest fall coming from those aged 35 to 54 demographic and earning less than $50,000. Quote, consumers' assessments of current business conditions turned negative, while views of the current labor market situation softened further. Consumers were also more pessimistic about future labor market conditions and less positive about future business conditions and future incomes, said Dana Peterson, chief economist at the conference board. The last time the confidence index dropped more came as inflation was just beginning to climb to what ultimately was the highest level in more than 40 years. Stocks saw some brief losses following the relief, while Treasury yields moved lower. And in addition to the steep drop in the confidence index, the present situation measure, that's actually a measure. It's a measure of, quote, and this is in there's capital letters here, present situation measure, worsened by 10.3 points to 124.3, and the expectations index was off by 4.6 points to 81.7. On the expectations measure, a reading below 80 is consistent with a recession, and we are 1.7 points away from that number 80. On inflation, the 12-month outlook rose to 5.2%, with concerns over price increases topping the list of economic concerns. Quote, the proportion of consumers anticipating a recession over the next 12 months remained low, but there was a slight uptick in the percentage of consumers believing that the economy was already in recession. Understand that. We just had a 50 basis point cut from the Fed because inflation was under control, yet the 12-month outlook rose to 5.2% on inflation. Does it sound to you that they were ready for the 50 basis point cut because inflation was under control? It certainly doesn't to me. Here's the way I read it. Jerome Powell sitting with all his buddies, and Janet Yellen's probably there. They're probably eating lobster or some other hoity-toity, highly expensive dish for lunch at Tavern on the Green in New York City, or the French Laundry in California, wherever these fuckers go to eat their food. And they say, inflation's not under control, but everything in the world is looking really bad because we've basically broken the system to the point that we can't fix it. What do? We'll drop the Federal Reserve rate by 50 basis points, allowing all the countries in the world to also reduce their interest rate so that money becomes cheap again. And then somebody says, but that won't work. That's just going to raise inflation, to which the reply is, we've already broken the system beyond repair. If you don't want to be put up against a wall and fucking shot, then you will raise and rather lower your interest rates because these people are going to be pissed. And the only way that we might be able to get out of this with our teeth intact and retire to some farm that nobody can find us on is if we give them cheap money right now. That's the way that I read this. That's the way that I read it. What are the Republicans doing? Well, the lawmakers are urging the Securities and Exchange Commission to rescind the controversial crypto rule named SAB 121 again. Yes, SAB 121 is in the news again. This is out of Decrypt. Vismaya V is writing on Monday. A group of over 40 Republican lawmakers sent yet another letter to U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission Chairman Gary Gensler, once again urging the agency to rescind its controversial crypto custody rule. The letter, led by House Financial Services Committee Chair Patrick McHenry, Senator Cynthia Lummis, and 40 other bipartisan lawmakers, comes after Congress passed a bipartisan repeal of Staff Accounting Bulletin number 121, SAB 121, which President Joe Biden later vetoed. Remember that? He vetoed it. It passed the House, passed the Senate, went to Biden's desk, veto. Bam. And the SEC's lack of clear crypto rules has become a central issue among critics who argue that the agency is pursuing the regime of regulation via litigation. SAB 121, meanwhile, has been under fire since its implementation in March 2022, with critics stating it disrupts traditional accounting standards and puts unnecessary pressure on financial institutions. And the lawmakers also argued that SAB 121, which requires crypto custodians to recognize digital assets as liabilities on their balance sheets, could increase consumer risk, weaken financial innovation, and discourage banks from offering custodial services for cryptocurrencies. SAB 121 deviates from established accounting standards, would fail to accurately reflect the underlying legal and economic obligations of the custodian, and place consumers at greater risk of loss, the politicians wrote in that letter. It was originally designed to address the risks associated with holding digital assets, but its detractors argued that it has the very opposite effect. They claim that it stifles innovation by pushing crypto custody into the hands of non-bank entities, which they believe could lead to a more concentrated risk in the industry. The critics have also accused the SEC of bypassing the Administrative Procedure Act, which requires a formal notice and comment period for new regulations. The letter noted the lack of transparency surrounding 121's implementation, stating that the SEC reportedly worked with certain institutions privately to help them avoid compliance. And the regulator did not immediately return a request for comment on that son of a bitch, I'll tell you that much. Although President Biden vetoed a previous resolution to repeal SAB 121 in June, citing concerns about financial stability and investor protection, the issue remains contentious. The House of Representatives attempted to override the veto on July the 10th of 2024, but failed to reach the two-thirds supermajority that they needed. The vote saw 207 Republicans and 21 Democrats in favor of the repeal. Ultimately, 183 Democrats voted against the measure, preventing the override and marking a major setback for the repeal effort. That has further angered those already at odds with the regulators' perceived stance against the industry, and in a recent federal court hearing, a panel of judges skewered the SEC's attorney over the agency's refusal to issue specific rules for crypto tokens, raising concerns about the SEC's long-standing approach of regulation by enforcement through sporadic lawsuits. The judges expressed frustration over the SEC's inability to clarify whether major cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum fall under securities regulations. In a separate case, cryptocurrency exchange Kraken has also responded to an SEC lawsuit by demanding a jury trial, arguing that the SEC has failed to provide clear regulatory guidance on which crypto assets qualify as securities. Ethereum qualifies, Bitcoin does not. That's all you need to know. Now, Kathy Woods, here is your daily hit of anti-hopium, because I'm going to give you a hit of hopium right after. And without balance, we don't know where we're at. We've always got to be zen with this kind of shit, right? So Kathy Woods, ARK Invest, has sold another $2.8 million worth of its very own spot Bitcoin ETF. She's getting out. That's what it looks like to me. James Hunt, out of the block, writes it. ARK Invest sold 44,609 shares of its ARK-B spot Bitcoin exchange traded fund, worth $2.8 million, from its next generation internet ETF on Monday. This comes after the firm previously offloaded shares in its own spot Bitcoin ETF on August the 1st, selling yet another $6.9 million of the very same ARK-B Bitcoin ETF. ARK Invest has now offloaded a total of $17.5 million worth of the Bitcoin ETF, its very own Bitcoin ETF, Having also sold 7.8 million of ARKB shares in July, the firm's strategy involves letting no individual holding take up more than 10% of an ETF's portfolio. This is to maintain diversification within its funds, meaning it is likely to continue rebalancing its asset weighings if ARKB gains in value relative to ARK's other holdings and fund. And that's all you need to know. So what just happened there? Right? Well, if you believe what I say, then Cathie Wood is basically trying to figure out a way to get out of the amount of position that she has in Bitcoin because she's selling her very own Bitcoin ETF. Now, if you read the last paragraph and believe it, she's just doing it because that's the rules that ARK Invest has for how much they hold in any particular ETF. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to take the tinfoil hat off, and I'm going to believe this last paragraph, that this is actually the way that Cathie Wood has to operate given her own rules that she put in place a few years back. I still don't think that it's the greatest look in the world where Cathie Woods, a self-made, staunch, quote-unquote, Bitcoin supporter, has these rules in place where she can't just allow herself to ape into Bitcoin, and she still has to play with all this toxic bullshit that people think is wealth. Again, don't forget to ask yourself the question, what is wealth? I don't think she's doing anybody any good, but it's her rules. It's her game. She can do whatever the hell she wants. I can't say shit about it. Now, Bitwise, here's your daily hit of hopium. I mean, straight up hopium. So take it with a grain of salt. The Bitwise CIO says that the most powerful people in finance are buying Bitcoin and crypto. Well, whatever, dude. Bitcoin Magazine, Vivek Sen says that Matt Hugan, Chief Investment Officer of Bitcoin and crypto asset manager Bitwise Investments, claims that the most powerful people in finance are allocating to Bitcoin and shitcoins. In a memo, Huygen described a telling moment at a recent financial advisor summit hosted by Barron's Magazine. That's a pretty respectable publication, I suppose. When asked, nearly every attendee said that they owned Bitcoin and shitcoin assets personally. Bitwise is a major Bitcoin and crypto index fund managing a lot of money and doing all this and all that, and they have an exchange-traded fund, whatever. Huygen said when he asked the same question at past advisor summits, only 10 to 20% would raise their hands. Approximately 70% said they owned Bitcoin and shitcoins this year, which represents a sea change. While fewer said that they had allocated Bitcoin and crypto in client accounts yet, Huygen expects that to follow within 6 to 12 months based on past trends. He called it one of the most powerful signs of the time. So let me get this straight as I pause here to reflect. These guys, these financial advisors, personally hold Bitcoin, but they're not really getting their clients into Bitcoin yet. No. That comes 6 to 12 months later. You see where I'm going with this? I'm going to buy it first and have my plebs pump my bags. Anyway, Huygen believes that the launch of the Bitcoin ETFs this year opened Bitcoin access to more investors and sparked the shift. But he says when advisors buy Bitcoin personally, it breeds familiarity and opens a path to later client allocations. Pump my bags. The anecdote reveals surging Bitcoin ownership among influential financial professionals firsthand as these elite, Jesus Christ, fuck these guys, as these elite advisors and money managers embrace Bitcoin. It validates and likely foreshadows a larger wave of institutional adoption. Again, pump my bags. If anybody wanted a regulation, it should be this. If you're a financial advisor, you're by law required to release what you're investing in personally. You're required. If anybody out there is listening to me says, we need more laws. We don't have enough laws. By God, what new law could we have? Well, put this one in place. Of all the things in the world that I find reprehensible, it's the ability of a financial advisor to get into an asset class and then 6 months later be able to tell their clients, you should buy this. How is that not just laughable? Pump my bags, motherfucker. Pump my bags. And here, this one. I'm going to laugh my ass off at this because I don't buy this shit for a second. It's out of Cointelegraph and written by Zoltan Vardai. And here it is. China still controls 55% of Bitcoin hash rate. Do you believe that? I call 100% bullshit. But instead of just saying it, let's read it. Chinese Bitcoin miners still control the lion's share of the global network, despite the ban on cryptocurrencies. And over 55% of the Bitcoin mining network is still controlled by Chinese mining pools, according to Qi Yongju, founder and CEO of CryptoQuant. Now we get into a little bit of the meat and potatoes of what they're saying. A little bit of a shock and awe headline to grab attention, I suppose. Bitcoin mining dominance is slowly shifting to U.S. mining firms. However, Zhu wrote in a September 23rd Twitter post, quote, Chinese mining pools operate 55% of the network, while United States pools manage 40%. U.S. pools primarily cater to institutional miners in America, while Chinese pools support relatively smaller miners in Asia, end quote. The surprising dominance of China over the network because of mining pools, not actual physical Bitcoin mining itself, but whatever, comes despite the country's blanket ban on Bitcoin. China is planning a significant amendment, however, to its anti-money laundering regulations next year, expanding them to cover cryptocurrency transactions in response to growing demands for stricter oversight. Prominent scholars and financial experts who participated in the discussions on the revised draft of the AML regulations said that the AML law involves a relatively broad scope, making it difficult for the draft to be comprehensive. The most urgent content can only be reflected in a framework first. China imposed a blanket ban back in 2021. However, with technological advancements and the decentralized nature of cryptocurrency, mainland users have found ways to access the crypto market anyway, leading to money laundering risks. Oh, of course, because that's all we do as a population of the world is we launder money. Do you ever ask yourself why we might be laundering money? Have you ever, really, think about it. If you're selling drugs, you want to launder that money so that it looks like it's clean. But what caused it to be dirty? The stigma of illicit drug sales. What if drugs were legal? You wouldn't need to launder it because it would just be your business. I'm a drug dealer. That's what I do. I've got giant bags of cocaine over here. I've got huge bags of heroin over here. And if you want to kill yourself, then by all means, go right ahead. But before you do, you better pay me some money. Sure. Is it evil? Is it unethical? Is it immoral? Those are questions only for you. I don't think that I would ever engage in that kind of business, but I don't think it should be illegal either. Think of all the other things. There's really not a whole lot. Now, here's the one thing. Like, if you're selling children into sex slavery or something like that, you should just be shot. And making money on that is not anything that at all where I think should be legal at all. But aside from just like murder for hire, child sex slavery and sex trafficking of minors and either just other humans too. Okay, there's a very small amount of things that humans do to each other that should actually result in the fact that if you've got money from that activity, that it should actually be considered dirty. Very few things in the world are that way. The majority of what people make money on that they need to launder the money for, think organized crime, actually shouldn't be illegal at all. And therefore the money shouldn't be considered dirty. So we end up with these AML and know your customer, KYC and CTF and whatever the hell that stands for. All these things They're made up. They're the sidecar to the motorcycle that is taking fiat or turning money from something that was backed by something like gold into pure fiat money, and thereby issuing a measure of control over the population. This anti-money laundering, that's the sidecar to it. It wasn't enough that they just said, you know what, we're going to make this fake money that's not backed by anything, and therefore we're going to be able to literally remote control what we want the citizens to do simply by saying, we'll take it away from your ass. We'll close your bank accounts down. Now, we didn't know this control was occurring in the mid-70s, late 70s, 80s, 90s. We didn't know about any of that. We didn't start seeing bank accounts of people being closed by federal agencies in the world until well into the 2000s. All right? AML is the sidecar to the toxicity that is the fiat currency that was created on purpose, not to fund wars as much as to fund control over you. What is wealth? What does it look like? How does it act? What does it do when you deploy that capital? Actual real wealth. After you've determined what real wealth is to you, does deploying that capital make you feel good? Does it make you feel bad? You neutral about it? How do you feel about holding real wealth? And in some cases, let's say, sure, I'll include Bitcoin in that. That, to me, that is actually real wealth. But when you're holding your wife or your children, when you tell these people that you love them, you know, after you fight and you got, you know, get makeup sex or something like that, and you realize that this person is the only person that could bear to stand your ass, and you're the only person that could bear to stand them, and therefore you end up being a really great team. And you have wonderful children together, and you have other family members that you go and spend Christmas with. You know, that's a type of capital that can, sure, they can take my kids, but they can't take my love for my kids. They can take me, but they cannot take my kids' love for me. They cannot take my wife's love for me. They can't steal the memory of me. Sure, can I buy chicken with that? No. Well, maybe. What if one of my kids raises chickens and they love me and they know that I need a chicken? What? And they give me that chicken. So now, I mean, did I do a transaction? Was love part of that transaction? I sure as shit, especially in today's times and in the very near future, I wouldn't depend on that. But if we just dismiss what I'm saying today as impossible forever and yon, then you're going to live a very, very sad life. And the rest of us that start thinking, maybe I'll apply a little bit of, you know, electricity and chemical stimulation inside various sectors of my brain to think on this issue and really come up with my own personal definition of what is wealth. And you might say, I got a farm, I got 50 acres, I got 100 cows and rotational grazing. Sure, and men with guns will come take it away from you, is one argument. My other argument is, can they find you? And that goes into my don't own anything, but make damn sure you control it. So that if I control a farm and I have 100% say-so of what happens on that farm and those 100 cows on that 50 acres and when they get butchered and where that meat goes and all of that and all the chickens and all the hogs and whatever it is that I'm doing on that farm that I quote unquote technically don't own, if I get to call the shots from fence row to fence row, then what's the difference? Now, if somehow or another me divorcing myself from the technical paper ownership of that property, does that mean that it's completely safe? No, because something owns it and you may control that something. And even if they never find, and by they, let's say that, like, I don't know, county officials that want to, they want that farm because they're gonna do that whole not civil seizure but eminent domain. They're building the road. They need the entire farm to build the road, and they're going to pay you fair market value, which is about 20% of what the farm's actually worth, by thereby basically stealing the land out from under your foot. Even if I don't own that land, technically, but I control it, I could still lose it, right? Does that mean never buy any land anywhere ever? No, that's not what I'm saying. That, I think, is a very dumb attitude to take. But we need to start thinking about how do we think differently about everything? I've already given you one major fucking way that I started thinking about this morning at 6 a.m. I woke up with the thought in my head that, my God, fiat money wasn't about funding wars. It was about projecting the control of the government decades into the future when they really needed it, because they knew that they broke the system in the 60s, even though we were still under the the gold standard. They knew they broke it back then. They probably knew that they broke it in 1913. They probably knew that they broke it before that, which is why they needed the Federal Reserve Act in 1913. And all of a sudden, they slowly and surely figured out a way to get us off of gold until finally in 1971, the last of the gold window was eventually closed by Nixon. And now we're seeing why they really did it all the way back before 1913. Let's say that they knew that they broke the system way back before then, that there was no recovery from it, that all they could do is continuously patch it and put Band-Aids on it. Now we see what they really meant. Now we see what the families, the people that are in control, and they are families. It's just like the mafia. It's like the Gambinos, only you don't know these particular families' names. You think it's the Clintons. That's just enforcers. That's just low-level street fucking junkie enforcers. We don't know the names of the real families. Oh, it's got to be the Bilderbergers. Well, that's not even a family name. Oh, well, it's got to be the Rockefellers. No, not really. Well, then surely it's the Morgans. No, probably not. I don't know who they are, neither do you. And we're never going to find out, and it doesn't matter. All we have to do is figure out a way to break the perception of what we think wealth is as having been defined by somebody who does not have our best interest in mind. They've given us an illusion. And that illusion is controlling us. It certainly is controlling Pavel Durov. If you're still using Telegram, stop. This is when you get on Nostr. And you might bitch and you might have problems with the UX and the UI, and you might have a problem with the fact that you can't send a DM. Well, then fucking fix it. And stop sitting there bitching about it. Because we don't have much more time left. And with that, I will say I will see you on the other side.
This has been Bitcoin and I'm your host, David Bennett. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and hope to see you again real soon. Have a great day.